So let's actually go ahead and implement this. We have two different tools we can use for implementing the algorithm. We have the HTML page that simply runs the JavaScript that you could download in a previous lesson, or we also have our JavaScript runner. So let's go ahead and try it in the JavaScript runner. So here I have the runner page. I can type in code here and then I can click to run it. So the first thing I want to do is prompt for test score 1. So I'm going to write a prompt statement. I'd like you to try to put everything in complete sentences. So we go ahead and prompt, and it's always a good idea to run things before you're finished writing all of your code so that you can find errors. So I can go ahead, it's going to ask me for my first test score. I did great, I got a 92. And we noticed that we didn't save that 92 anywhere, so we can't use that test score that we put in. So let's go ahead and create a variable for test score 1. And so let's go ahead and run it now. Okay, it should have saved the 92 in test score 1. Well, let's just put in a little helper statement in here. And just to double check our work, we did store test score 1 in test score 1. So if we run it, okay, good, we've got our 92. Okay, so our next step is to prompt for test score 2. Oh, well, that's just like test score 1. So I'm going to copy and paste and then just change it to test score 2 and ask for your second test. So I like to try it out again. So the first one was a 92. The second one, I was overconfident. I didn't study, I got an 82. Okay, so far so good. And we have one more test score to get. So this will be our test score 3. And I'll ask for the third test score. So I put in my test scores again. And they all prompted properly and they all showed back properly. So now I'm going to clean up those alerts that were just helpers. We don't want to keep intermediate results in our assignments cluttering up what we need to turn in. So once you feel confident that your code is working, take those little helpers out. Okay, let's look at the next step. We want to sum the test scores. Well, that's adding them all together. So we want to take test score 1 plus test score 2 plus test score 3. Well, it doesn't do any good to add them together if we don't store them somewhere. So let's create a variable to store them. And then let's just double check that our sum looks good. So we'll test it. 92, 82, 95, those are our test scores. And it says the sum of 92 plus 82 plus 95 is 928,295. Well, that does not seem right, does it? Well, if you notice, there are our test scores right here. We have the 92 followed by the 82 followed by the 95. Well, it looks like it's concatenating those numbers together. Well, what type does prompt return? It returns a string. And so when it sees these addition signs, it thinks that you want to concatenate instead of add. We have to convert those strings into numbers before we add them together. Well, we can do that by explicitly calling the number function. So we're going to call the number function on the entire prompt. So these parentheses on the outside are for the number function, and then the whole prompt function is called inside the number function. We need to do that for all of our numbers. And let's see how we did. 269, that looks like a much better number. Each of our test scores were a bit under 100, so when we add them together, it should be a bit under 300. So that looks pretty good now. So let's look at our next step. We want to divide the sum by 3 to get the average. Okay, we're going to take the sum and divide it by 3. Well, that will do the division, but then we can't get that number, so we're going to have to store that somewhere. So let's store it in something called average, and let's assign that average the sum divided by 3. And now let's alert our average. So put in our test scores again. And we're still alerting that sum, and that was just an extra intermediate step, so we'll have to take that out. And we get 89.66666. Well, wouldn't that be nice if it was just a flat percentage and to round that off? There is a function you can use that will round these to a specific number of decimal places that you specify. The name of that function is called toFixed. You do that by putting a dot after the average and then calling TO, capital F-I-X-E-D, and then parentheses so you can say how many decimal places do you want. Well, in this case, I think no decimal points would be appropriate because that's how your grading scale works. And so let's go ahead and try it again. I'll put in the same numbers again. There was our sum, and now we have 90% coming back. That looks a lot better than 89.6666667 anyway. We have calculated our average, but we haven't been very helpful to our user. We haven't told the user what they're getting back. So we need to add a label to our average. We can add that label right in our alert by concatenating a string. So we need double quotations for our string, and we want to concatenate the average to that string, so we need a plus sign to concatenate that string. Well, what do we want to put in the string? Well, just to tell the user what we're doing. So we can say the test score average is, and then remember, it'll just concatenate that string right next to it. So we want to put a space after that S so that we have a separation between the words and the number. If we want it to be a complete sentence, we'd have to concatenate a period at the end, but sometimes that's confusing when you put the periods in with the numbers, so we're just going to leave that period off. So let's run it one more time. And we have the test score average is 90. So we have our correct inputs, we have our correct output, and the last thing we need to do is to clean up and get rid of any alerts that aren't part of the program. Well, that's the sum alert. I'm going to clean that off, and now we have our program. Now in the JavaScript runner, it won't save the program, so we might want to copy that into a file. I can highlight it, I can press Control-C together, and I can go to Atom, say I want a new file, and I can do Control-V, and that will paste that code into the file. And then I want to do a Save As. If you're in your working directory, it will go right to your working directory for you. And I can create my calculate average, and this is our code, so I'm going to name it .js. And a kind of cool thing about Atom is if you have your file with the extension JS, it will do color coding for you to help you with your code. The keywords will be in the purple, and strings will be in the green, and the function calls are in the blue. If you can see those colors that can help you. The colors are not necessary, and you can actually change the color scheme if you can see different colors better by going to the atom options, and you can just Google that. Or ask me for help if you need help changing your colors. And there we have it. We've written a program. We've figured out what our inputs are. We figured out what our outputs are. We came up with the steps or the algorithm to our program. We discovered that we needed to pay attention to the conversions, that we needed an explicit conversion because our additions were working as concatenations, and we tested our program. These are the steps you should take for every program that you need to write.